My commander sent us into a place no one was meant to return from. He knew we would die there, but it didn't stop him. Out of the entire battalion, only a handful of us crawled back alive. That day I swore one thing: he would feel exactly what we felt. Commander, now it's your turn. The night was colder than usual, though we were somewhere where nights never offered much comfort anyway. Our boots sank into the mud, rifles strapped to our backs, the silence between us louder than the distant artillery fire. The air smelled of iron, smoke, and something rotten, like death had already claimed the ground long before we arrived. The order had come suddenly, without briefing, without reason. Advance, the commander had barked, his voice sharp and final. We knew what it meant. No reconnaissance, no backup, no extraction plan. We weren't soldiers being deployed, we were pawns being discarded. I was only 21, still foolish enough to believe in loyalty, still naive enough to think commanders cared about the men they led. That night stripped away every last piece of that illusion. We crossed into the valley under the cover of a moonless sky, shadows moving among shadows. The terrain was a labyrinth of ruined buildings, trenches, and half-buried corpses from battles past. My heartbeat drummed in my ears, drowning out the whispers of my brothers in arms. Then it started. A flare hissed into the air, exploding into a sickly red glow that bathed the valley like fresh blood. And with it came the gunfire, merciless, thunderous, everywhere at once. Bullets ripped through the darkness, finding flesh, tearing screams from throats. My friend Carlo, the one who always carried his lucky coin, dropped without a sound, his coin spinning out of his pocket, glinting before it disappeared into the mud. We tried to take cover, but cover was a lie. The valley was a killing ground. We had been sent into a slaughterhouse, and the butcher was waiting. Hours blurred into seconds, seconds stretched into eternities. Men I had eaten with, laughed with, shared cigarettes with, gone in sprays of red mist and silence. By the time the firing ceased, out of an entire battalion, fewer than a dozen of us were left standing. Standing wasn't even the right word. We were crawling, broken, dragging ourselves through the mud like animals. When we staggered back to camp days later, gaunt and hollow-eyed, our commander was waiting. He didn't ask about the dead. He didn't ask what happened. He only smirked, as if he had expected this outcome all along. That's when the fire inside me ignited. I wasn't just going to survive. I wasn't just going to carry the memory of the fallen. I was going to make him pay. Not with a quick death. No, with suffering. With fear. With betrayal. The same betrayal he had fed us. That night, while my brothers wept for the lost, I carved a promise into my soul. Commander, you will feel what we felt. You will drown in it. And when your screams echo through the night, I'll know justice has begun. The days after the mission were heavy with silence. None of us spoke of the valley. None of us dared. The weight of it pressed into our bones, carved itself into our skin. Every night when I closed my eyes, I saw Carlo's coin spinning in the mud, heard the choking gasp of Luca as bullets tore through his chest, felt the spray of blood that was not my own. The camp tried to move on. Orders kept coming. Supplies were rationed. The routine of war pressed forward as if the dead meant nothing, as if they hadn't even existed. But for those of us who had crawled back, the ghosts never left. And our commander? He wore his medals with pride, his uniform spotless, his boots polished so clean they shone under the sun. When he passed us, he didn't look at our eyes. He didn't see the emptiness he had created. Or maybe he did, and that was what made him smirk every time. I started watching him. At first, it was unconscious, the way a dog watches the hand that beats it. But soon it became something more. I memorized his routines, the way he drank his coffee at the same hour each morning, how he lingered in his office after others had retired, how he kept a small flask hidden in the left drawer of his desk. I noticed the little things, the way his right hand trembled slightly when he wrote reports, the way his jaw clenched whenever someone questioned his authority. He wasn't untouchable. He wasn't invincible. He was human. And humans bleed. But patience, I told myself. Revenge is a dish that cannot be rushed. At night, when the others slept, I sharpened my knife in silence. I traced the blade with my fingers, imagining the commander's face reflected in the steel. My hands ached to strike, but no, this wasn't just about killing him. Death alone was too merciful. No, I needed him to understand. To feel what we had felt. To be hunted, betrayed, discarded. I began to write letters. Not to send, just to prepare. Letters forged in the names of higher officers, with orders twisted and poisoned. I had always been good at details, at imitating handwriting, at listening when others ignored. My father once said I had the memory of a thief, perfect for stealing truth from lies. Now I would use it to build his downfall. Weeks passed. We were sent on smaller missions, nothing like the valley. The commander's confidence grew again, his smirk returned sharper than ever. And all the while I waited, gathering pieces of the trap. The first step was fear. One evening, when the commander retired to his quarters, he found a small object lying on his desk. A coin. Mud-stained. The same kind Carlo used to carry. I knew because I had gone back into that cursed valley to retrieve it. Risking death again just to hold that tiny piece of him. I left it there without a note, without explanation. The next morning I saw him staring at it, his face pale, his fingers trembling as he closed the drawer to hide it. That was the beginning. From then on, the whispers began. At night, scraps of paper slid under his door. You sent them to die. A bloody handprint smeared on his mirror. The faint echo of footsteps outside his quarters, though no one was there. Sleep began to abandon him. His eyes sank into dark hollows. His temper grew shorter, snapping at officers for the smallest mistakes. And every time he looked around, I was there. Silent. Watching. He didn't know it yet, but the valley was coming for him. Days turned into weeks, and the commander was no longer the same man who had once strutted through the camp like a peacock. His uniform still gleamed, his medals still caught the sun, but the man inside was rotting. He barely ate. He barely slept. His temper snapped like brittle glass at the slightest noise. Soldiers whispered about him behind his back, calling him cursed, saying the ghosts of the valley had returned to drag him down. But none of them knew the truth. None of them saw the coin I had placed under his pillow one night. None of them saw the boots outside his door filled with mud, though he had polished them only hours earlier. None of them heard the scratching on his window like fingernails against the glass. Only he did. And only I knew where it all came from. One night, I followed him after he staggered out of his quarters, drunk and half-mad, clutching his pistol like it was the last thread of sanity he still held. His steps were uneven, his breathing ragged, and every few moments he whipped around, certain someone was behind him. He wasn't wrong. I stayed in the shadows, close enough to watch, far enough to remain unseen. The moonlight stretched his figure into a long, trembling silhouette on the ground. He wandered through the camp, muttering to himself, spitting curses into the air. Finally, he stumbled to the edge of the training yard and collapsed onto a bench. His head fell into his hands, his shoulders shaking, not from cold but from fear. That was when I struck the next blow. I had stolen a fragment of Luca's blood-stained uniform from the valley, a torn scrap of fabric that I had carried in silence for weeks. That night, while the commander drank himself numb, I pinned it to his door. Nothing else, no message, no explanation. Just the ragged cloth, heavy with the scent of earth and dried blood. The scream he let out the next morning woke half the camp. The men began to talk. They said he was losing his mind. They said he was unfit to lead. They said the dead were rising for vengeance. But I didn't want just rumors. I wanted him to feel trapped. So I began to move the game inside his head. A forged letter arrived on his desk, an order from higher command, demanding an explanation for the losses at the valley. The handwriting, the seals, even the phrasing were flawless. I had studied enough reports to mimic them perfectly. The commander went pale as he read it. I knew because I watched him through the crack in the door. His lips moved as he whispered the words to himself, his trembling fingers leaving sweat stains on the paper. 4 days afterward, he walked like a condemned man waiting for the noose. He stopped sleeping in his quarters, preferring instead to keep a chair in his office, pistol always within reach. Every sound made him flinch. Every shadow made him turn. The proud commander was crumbling. And I wasn't done. One evening, I entered his quarters while he was away. The place reeked of alcohol and sweat, the sheets tangled like the claws of a dying beast. I took the coin again, the same one I had placed on his desk, and set it on his pillow. This time, I carved words into the wood of his desk with my knife. You sent us to die. Now it's your turn. When he returned, the sound he made was not a scream. It was worse. It was the hollow, broken sob of a man who had lost all control. He locked himself inside, pistol clutched in shaking hands. The guards at his door later whispered that they heard him begging into the darkness, pleading with the dead to leave him alone. But the dead never listen. That night, as I lay awake in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, I felt something inside me shift. For the first time since the valley, I didn't dream of blood or screams. I dreamed of silence. Because the commander was no longer the untouchable figure who had condemned us. He was weak. He was afraid. And soon he would understand what true fear really meant. This was only the beginning. The commander stopped being a leader. He became a shadow. His voice, once sharp and commanding, now cracked like dry wood. Orders came late, confused, hesitant. Soldiers who once trembled at his presence now looked at him with pity, or worse, contempt. But for me it wasn't enough. He had sent us to die. He had stood safe while Luca, Dimitro, and dozens of others bled into the dirt. A broken mind was just the beginning. His body, his soul, they needed to feel the weight of what he had done. So I waited. I watched. And I planned. One night, under a moonless sky, I slipped into the old armory where scraps of abandoned gear lay forgotten. There, I gathered pieces of rusted helmets, torn uniforms, cracked dog tags. The remnants of soldiers who had come before us, ghosts swallowed by war and memory. Piece by piece I built them into something else. Effigies. Crude shapes of men, propped against walls, draped in blood-stained cloth I had kept hidden since the valley. Figures that in the darkness could pass for the dead. By dawn, I had planted them across the path the commander always walked to reach his office. Silent sentinels waiting for him. When he stepped outside and froze, I saw it in his eyes. For a split second he thought the dead had come back. His hand twitched for the pistol at his side, but he didn't draw it. He simply stood there, pale, breathless, staring at the faceless soldiers who blocked his way. I was in the shadows watching. My pulse steady. My mind calm. And then he whispered it. A single word. Forgive. His voice broke. He stumbled past them, muttering, shaking, as if praying that what he saw wasn't real. But it was real. Because I made it real. Every day the pressure grew tighter. Every night the walls of his sanity closed in. And still I was patient. Because true revenge is not in the strike. It is in the anticipation. In the slow bleed of fear that never ends. Until one evening when the chance came. The commander called a meeting with what was left of us. Barely 20 men sat in the mess hall, silent, hollow-eyed. He stood at the front, hands trembling as he tried to address us. "Comrades," he began, voice hoarse, "I know you've lost faith in me. But we must hold on." I saw it then, the way his gaze darted, the sweat dripping down his temples, the twitch of his fingers. He wasn't speaking to us. He was speaking to his ghost. So I gave him more ghosts. I rose slowly, letting the dim light catch the scar on my cheek, the scar I had taken in the valley. "Do you remember their faces, Commander?" I asked, my voice calm, almost gentle. The hall went silent. Every soldier turned. He froze. His lips parted, but no words came. "Do you remember Luca? How his body fell into the mud? How he screamed your name while you stood safe behind your orders?" His hands shook. His chair clattered as he stumbled back. I stepped forward, my shadow stretching toward him. "You sent us to die, Commander. And now you will feel what we felt." The room was thick with silence, every eye fixed on us. The commander's breath came in gasps. I only followed orders," he stammered. I smiled. Not with warmth, but with the cold satisfaction of a blade sliding into flesh. So did we. That was the moment the game ended. There was no hiding anymore. He knew it was me. And I knew he would never sleep again. But his end wouldn't come with a bullet. Not quickly. No, his end would be slow, deliberate, just as ours had been. Because revenge is not about killing. It's about making him live long enough to wish for death. And I was only getting started. That night, the commander locked himself inside his quarters. The lights burned until morning. No sleep. No rest. Only fear. But I didn't need him to sleep. I needed him awake. Awake enough to remember every sound, every whisper, every shadow that reminded him of the valley. So I gave him more. I crept into his office while he was away and spread maps across his desk. Maps marked with red crosses exactly where our brothers had fallen. On the walls, I nailed torn, mud-stained boots and broken rifles, souvenirs from that cursed place. I left a single message scratched into the wood of his table with my knife. "You survived the valley. But the valley hasn't survived you." When he returned and saw it, he collapsed into the chair, face pale, hands trembling. 4 hours he didn't move. The men noticed. They whispered that the commander had lost his mind, that he was cursed. Some laughed behind his back, others avoided him entirely. Respect had rotted into disgust. But I wasn't finished. On the 7th night I made my move. We were ordered to patrol the ruins outside the camp. Jagged buildings, hollow and echoing, a graveyard of stone. I positioned myself so that the commander was isolated, cut off from the others by collapsed walls and debris. When he turned a corner, I was waiting. I didn't wear my uniform that night. Instead, I wore the tattered remains of a comrade's jacket, stained with dried blood, the name tag still clinging to the fabric. Luca. The commander froze. His breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened in pure terror. "You," he whispered. "No, you're dead." I stepped closer, letting the moonlight strike my face just enough for him to see the scar. "No, Commander," I said softly. "I lived. And that's your curse." He stumbled back, nearly tripping over the rubble. His pistol shook in his hand. He aimed at me, but his hand was trembling so violently that he couldn't fire. "You sent us there," I continued, my voice low, sharp as glass. "You watched us die. And now you will die as we did, slowly. Alone. Forgotten." I could see it, the memory tearing through his mind, dragging him back to that valley, the screams, the blood, the fire. His lips trembled as he muttered names under his breath, names of the dead, begging them for forgiveness. I didn't strike. Not yet. Instead, I leaned close enough that he could feel my breath. "This is just the beginning," I whispered. "Every sunrise will bring another ghost. Every night, another reminder. You won't know when it ends, Commander. But it will end, with you." I left him there, broken, clutching his pistol like a child clings to a toy. From that day forward, the commander was no longer a man. He was a hunted animal. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the valley. Every time he opened them, he saw me. And still I waited. Because revenge is sweetest when it ripens slowly, until the final cut. Days turned into weeks. The commander barely ate. He barely spoke. His skin grew pale, his eyes hollow. Everywhere he went, I was there. A shadow at the edge of his vision. A whisper in the night. The echo of boots behind him, though no one followed. One evening he stumbled into the mess hall, shouting at the soldiers. "They're here. The dead, they're here." Silence fell. Men stared. Some crossed themselves. Others looked at me, because they knew, even if they didn't dare say it, that I was the one unraveling him. The commander's authority crumbled. No one saluted him anymore. No one trusted him. He was no longer a leader, he was prey. And prey always runs. It happened on a stormy night. Lightning split the sky, rain hammered the earth, and the camp was swallowed in darkness. The commander fled. I knew he would. His mind was too broken to endure the ghosts I'd fed him. He slipped out of camp, clutching a rifle, thinking he could escape the shadows. But the valley always waits. I followed him for hours through mud and storm, until he returned, almost instinctively, to the ruins where so many of us had bled out. The place where it all began. He collapsed on his knees in the mud, screaming at the sky. Why did I live? Why did they die? His voice broke into sobs, raw and desperate. He pressed the barrel of the rifle to his head, his trembling finger on the trigger. But I wouldn't let him end it so easily. I stepped from the shadows. My voice cut through the storm like steel. "You don't get to choose, Commander. You don't get mercy." He froze. The rifle slipped from his hand. His wide, terrified eyes met mine. I circled him slowly, my boots sinking into the mud. He looked up at me, broken, begging. "I was following orders," he whispered. "It wasn't my choice." I stopped. The rage burned in my chest, but my voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "We all followed orders. And we died for it. The difference, Commander," I leaned close, "is that you survived. And survival is the heaviest curse." His lips trembled. "Please, what do you want from me?" I drew the knife, the same blade I'd carried since the valley, scarred and rusted with time. His breath hitched. "I want you to feel," I said. "To feel what we felt. The fear. The pain. The betrayal." I pressed the blade lightly against his throat, not cutting, not yet, just enough to make his pulse race against the steel. He sobbed. "Forgive me." I shook my head. "No forgiveness. Not here. Not tonight." Lightning lit the ruins around us, and in that flash I saw not just him, but the faces of every brother who'd fallen. Luca, Aaron, Mikhail, the ones who never came home. Their silence screamed through me. I tightened my grip. The commander shut his eyes, bracing for the end. But I didn't strike. Not yet. Instead, I whispered the truth, the deepest cut of all. "You won't die tonight, Commander. Death is too kind. You'll live with this guilt. You'll wake up every morning with the valley in your chest, with their names in your ears. And when death finally comes for you, it won't be me who kills you, it will be them." I dropped the knife in the mud at his knees. Then I turned and walked away, leaving him screaming into the storm, clawing at the earth like a man already buried. They said later that the commander never returned to camp. Some claim he wandered into the ruins and never came back. Others whisper he still walks the valley at night, calling the names of the dead. As for me, I carry my ghost with me. But unlike him, I made peace with them. Because I gave them justice. And justice is all that's left when mercy dies.